June 5, 1944. 0341 hours, Amiens Railway Junction, occupied France. The first collision happened exactly as Pierre Lacroix had calculated. 2,147 tons of German military hardware, traveling at 43 kilometers per hour, met an identical mass at 42 kilometers per hour. The impact occurred where Track 2 and Track 4 converged. The sound was not a bang or crash, it was a tearing. A long, sustained metallic shriek as steel frames buckled and coupling mechanisms shattered under forces they were never designed to withstand. Pierre heard it from inside the signal box. The building trembled. Oil lamps swung. The telegraph machine rattled. For 3 seconds, the world paused. Then explosions. Multiple explosions, munitions cargo igniting. The eastern sky lit up orange, turning night into dusk. He did not move. He sat at his desk, staring at 2 instruments showing different times. The wall clock showed 0350 hours. His pocket watch showed 0338 hours. 12 minutes separated the world the Germans believed they inhabited from the world that had just become true. Below, German voices erupted. Shouted commands, running boots, truck engines. Within seconds, the junction descended into chaos. Searchlights swung across rail yards, illuminating smoke already rising from burning wreckage. The door burst open. Hauptsturmführer Klaus Richter entered with 2 armed guards. His uniform was disheveled, sweat visible despite the cool air. His eyes contained something close to terror. "What happened?" His voice cracked. "I want a complete explanation, now." Pierre turned, allowing exactly the right amount of confusion to cross his face. 4 years of occupation had taught him masks. "I do not know, sir. 2 trains. The collision happened at the northern approach. I saw nothing. I heard the impact. That is all." Richter stepped closer. Pierre could smell tobacco and schnapps. "You were monitoring the scheduling boards. You controlled the signals. How did 2 trains arrive simultaneously?" Pierre's mind calculated. Richter operated on the wall clock. Richter believed trains should have been separated by 3 minutes. But they weren't. This was the critical moment. The northern train was Gamma 6. Pierre began carefully. Scheduled to arrive at 0320 hours. Routing was Track 2. I cleared the track at 0315 hours, as ordered. The train arrived and soldiers disembarked. Normal procedure. Richter checked the scheduling cards, finger moving from Track 2 to Track 4. His face darkened. Gamma 6 arrived on time. Pierre continued. At 0320 hours, but Gamma 7 was scheduled for 0347 hours. That should have been 27 minutes separation. Sufficient. It was sufficient. Richter grabbed Pierre by the collar. Unless, did you receive a routing change? A time adjustment? No, sir. I received only the standard schedule. I cleared the tracks according to protocol. I have done this every night for 4 years. Below, chaos intensified. Military personnel extracted survivors from wreckage. Fire spread. Pierre could see flames licking upward, illuminating the broken trains like a funeral pyre. Richter released him and checked his wristwatch against the wall clock. His jaw tightened. The time is 0352 hours. He looked at Pierre. You disagree? This was the moment. Pierre glanced at the wall clock, then his pocket watch. He allowed doubt to cross his face. The wall clock shows 0350, sir. Your watch shows 0352. Perhaps there is a discrepancy in synchronization. We performed the standard check at 2300 hours. Everything was normal. Richter's eyes moved between timepieces. Pierre could see calculations happening. The station master was intelligent, dangerous. Intelligent enough to understand that a 2-minute discrepancy could produce exactly this catastrophe. Send a telegram to Le Mans, Richter said to a guard. Inform command of the collision. 2 military trains. Request immediate investigation into the scheduling system. Have engineers check the master clock. I want synchronization verification within the hour." The guard saluted and moved toward the telegraph. Richter turned back to Pierre. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, screams of wounded soldiers could be heard. The stench of burning fuel and flesh drifted through windows. "You have maintained this station for 4 years," Richter said quietly. "More dangerous now. Not a single accident, not a single serious incident. And tonight, when 2 critical supply trains are scheduled, the system fails. What are the odds of that, Signalman Lacroix?" Pierre did not answer. Silence was more convincing than any response. "I believe," Richter continued, "we will find this was a simple failure, a clock malfunction. These things happen in war. The engineers will discover your master clock was running behind schedule. Temperature variations or mechanical degradation. This explanation will be accepted because the alternative, that someone deliberately manipulated the scheduling system, is too terrible to contemplate." Richter moved toward the door, then paused. "But you and I will know the truth, will we not? Even if we never speak of it." Then he was gone. Pierre waited 90 seconds, then moved to the window. Searchlights focused on the collision site. German personnel established a perimeter. Medical personnel moved through wreckage, though there was little they could do. The impact had been catastrophic. He looked at his pocket watch. 0354 hours, according to the watch. 356 according to the wall clock. The divergence was still there, still growing, still working. From somewhere to the east, artillery fire. Louder now, closer. The sound of American and British counterattack grinding forward from Normandy beaches. The sound of occupation beginning to fracture. 1,223 German soldiers had been scheduled to arrive on Gamma 7 and Gamma 8. They were supposed to disembark at forward positions by 0600 hours. Instead, they were burning in wreckage. But Pierre did not know the full scale yet. He knew only what was visible: the fire, the chaos, the smell of burning flesh. And he knew something else. Among those burning were conscripts. Boys, 17-year-old replacements from Berlin who had never been in combat. They had boarded a train at Lyon. Now they were gone. Because a railway signalman had adjusted a Swiss pocket watch by 3 rotations of an adjustment screw. The telegraph chattered again. Pierre's hand moved toward it, but movement in the shadows caught his attention. A figure below the signal box. Someone who should not be there. A German officer, but not Richter. Someone new. The officer was examining switching mechanisms closely, looking at lever positions, looking at scheduling cards, looking for evidence. The officer looked up. Their eyes met across darkness. For 3 seconds, the officer's gaze remained fixed on Pierre's face, calculating, analyzing. Then he looked away and began writing in a notebook. Pierre's mouth went dry. He realized with terrible clarity that Richter was wrong. The station master believed a simple explanation would satisfy his superiors. But this new officer was thinking differently. This officer understood that 2 trains do not collide by accident. The officer looked up again and stared directly at the signal box window. Pierre knew, in that instant, that everything had changed. The collision had succeeded. But it had left evidence. It had left an officer intelligent enough to read that evidence. It had left the beginning of an investigation that would eventually trace back to one thing. A pocket watch. June 6, 1944, 0600 hours. The engineers arrived precisely on schedule. 3 men in Wehrmacht grey carrying leather cases. Obersturmbannführer Hans Dietrich, a chronometer specialist, Hauptmann Friedrich Weber, a railway systems engineer, and Lieutenant Klaus Mengel from the Geheime Feldpolizei, military secret police, carrying a clipboard. Pierre had not slept. He had monitored telegraph traffic, updated scheduling boards, and watched wreckage being cleared. By dawn, most bodies had been recovered. Burned trains moved to a holding yard. The junction partially returned to operation, but the stench remained. Dietrich approached the master clock without preamble. Small, perhaps 60, with grey hair and precision in his movements. He removed the clock face and examined the mechanism with surgical intensity. "How long has this clock been in operation?" His voice was quiet, cultured. "Since 1931, sir," Pierre replied, hands gripping the desk edge. "Installed by the French Railway Authority, maintained according to standard protocols." "And when was the last complete overhaul?" Pierre consulted the maintenance log he had prepared the night before, backdating entries. "March 1944, sir. Approximately 10 weeks ago." Dietrich made a sound. Satisfaction or disappointment, impossible to tell. 10 weeks. In this climate, with temperature variations, a clock of this design would degrade perhaps 1 to 2 seconds per week. Over 10 weeks, 8 to 20 seconds would be normal. But the current discrepancy is 2 minutes. That suggests either the clock has been running longer than your log indicates, or the mechanism experienced catastrophic failure. "The clock was running normally yesterday evening, sir. We performed synchronization check at 2300 hours. The discrepancy was not present." Dietrich removed the escape wheel assembly and held it to the light. His eyes moved across it with intensity. After a minute of silence, he spoke. "The balance wheel shows we're inconsistent with 10 weeks since overhaul. The jewel settings show microscopic damage, and the adjustment screw," he gestured to the regulator, "has been turned recently, multiple times. The wear pattern is fresh, less than 48 hours old." Richter moved forward from the corner. "What are you suggesting, Obersturmbannführer?" "I am suggesting," Dietrich said carefully, "that someone has been adjusting this clock's rate deliberately. The pattern is inconsistent with normal maintenance. Each turn has been precise, applied in one direction only, to slow the clock. This is not malfunction. This is sabotage." The word hung like a death sentence. Pierre felt the room spin. He concentrated on breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Control. Everything depended on control. Richter's face went pale. "How certain are you?" "Absolutely certain," Dietrich replied. "I have examined thousands of chronometric mechanisms. I have seen every type of failure. This is not failure. This is deliberate manipulation. The question is not whether sabotage occurred. The question is why and who." Lieutenant Mengel stepped forward, 25, with pale blue eyes and cold expression. Already writing, not notes, conclusions. "Who has access to this clock?" Mengel asked softly. "Only myself and the station commander, sir," Pierre said immediately. "The clock is secured. It requires a key." "Show me the key." Pierre retrieved it from the desk drawer. Simple brass key, no different from thousands used in railway operations. Mengel took it and examined it. "How many keys like this exist?" "3, sir. One on this ring. One kept by the station commander. One at railway headquarters in Paris." "And the key to this signal box?" "The station commander and myself, sir." Mengel turned to Richter. "Station master, I will need to examine all keys related to this station. Personnel records for everyone who works here. Interview every person who has been in this signal box in 6 weeks, and examine telegraph logs for unusual communications." Richter nodded. He understood. An investigation, the kind that ended with executions. "Of course, Lieutenant, I will cooperate fully. But this station has operated under my command for 18 months. I have personally supervised all protocols. If there was sabotage, it was someone with intimate knowledge." Mengel's eyes moved from Richter to Pierre. "Then we begin with the people who work here, starting with the signalman." For the next 6 hours, Pierre was questioned. Mengel asked about his background, family, political beliefs, relationships, finances, access to tools, knowledge of chronometric mechanisms, familiarity with German scheduling, language skills, movements during June 4th and early June 5th. Questions came like artillery shells, designed to find contradictions, hidden loyalties, proof of guilt. Pierre answered each with careful precision. He had spent the night preparing his story. He had memorized it. He had lived it in his mind until it became truth. But the hardest moment came when Mengel asked about the adjustment screw. The adjustment screw shows recent manipulation, Mengel said. Explain how that happened, given that only you and the station master have access. Pierre did not answer immediately. Silence suggested careful thought. Finally, he spoke. I adjusted the clock, sir. Mengel's pen stopped. Richter's head jerked up. Dietrich turned to look at Pierre. You adjusted the clock? Mengel's voice remained calm, but his eyes sharpened. When? Yesterday evening, sir, at approximately 2200 hours. I noticed the clock was running 1 second fast relative to command post synchronization. I made a small adjustment to bring it into tolerance. You adjusted a chronometric mechanism by yourself, without authorization, without documentation, without supervision. Yes, sir. Why? Because I am trained to maintain this equipment, sir. My responsibility is to ensure the scheduling system operates correctly. A clock running 1 second fast would cause systematic errors. Mengel wrote something. Then he looked at Dietrich. Is this possible? Could a 1 second discrepancy be corrected with a single adjustment? Dietrich examined the screw again. He was thorough. After a minute, he spoke. It is possible. 1 complete rotation would produce 4 to 5 seconds of rate change per 24 hours. To correct 1 second, one would apply perhaps 1/4 rotation. However, he paused. The wear pattern suggests multiple turns, not a fraction, multiple complete rotations. That is consistent with sabotage, Mengel said. Not a question. Consistent with deliberate manipulation for purposes other than simple correction. Dietrich agreed. Mengel turned back to Pierre. You adjusted by 1/4 rotation, yet the mechanism shows multiple rotations. Explain this discrepancy. Pierre felt the trap closing. He had confessed to adjusting, which was necessary. But in confessing, he had forced himself to explain the degree of manipulation, and that degree was evidence of sabotage. I made an error, sir, Pierre said carefully. I adjusted more than necessary. I may have turned the screw more than 1/4 rotation. I was not precise. I was attempting to correct what I believed was a small discrepancy. But I may have overcorrected. By how much? I do not remember exactly, sir. Perhaps 1/2 rotation, perhaps more. 1/2 rotation would produce 8 to 10 seconds correction per 24 hours, enough to cause a 2-minute discrepancy within 3 days. Yet you claim you adjusted yesterday evening. A discrepancy of that magnitude would manifest within 12 hours. Why was there no discrepancy noted during this morning's synchronization check? Pierre realized he had walked into another trap. There had been no morning check. He had fabricated it. Now Mengel had caught him. There was no morning synchronization check, sir. Mengel continued. I have verified communications logs. Command post did not perform a check this morning. So either you miscalculated the clock's drift, which suggests you did not understand what you were doing, or you were lying about when you adjusted the clock. Mengel stood. He was not large, but he seemed to grow. He walked slowly around the desk, eyes never leaving Pierre's face. Let me explain what I think happened, Signalman Lacroix. I think you deliberately adjusted this clock to run behind schedule. I think you did this intending to cause the scheduling system to malfunction. I think you understood such malfunction would cause trains to collide. And I think you performed this act with intention to inflict casualties on the German military. Am I correct? Pierre did not answer. There was no answer that would save him. Any denial would contradict evidence. Any confession would result in execution. Any explanation would sound like excuse. Mengel waited 30 seconds. Then he turned to a guard. place this man under arrest. He is to be held at Amiens North Station pending court-martial. Remove him." Guards moved forward. Before Pierre could respond, his arms were seized and he was pulled from his chair. He did not resist. Resistance would only accelerate his death. He allowed himself to be dragged from the signal box, down wooden stairs, into a military truck waiting outside. As the truck pulled away, Pierre looked back at the junction one final time. The wreckage had been cleared, tracks repaired, scheduling boards cleaned. Within hours, trains would pass through again. The system would function. The war would continue. But 1,900 men would not see tomorrow. And a railway signalman named Pierre Lacroix would not see next week. At Amiens North Station, in an underground detention cell, Pierre was questioned for 72 hours without pause. The interrogators were experts. They understood pressure. They understood how to identify contradictions. They understood how to break a man's will. But Pierre had decided before arrest that he would confess to nothing beyond the clock adjustment. He would claim he overcorrected a minor discrepancy. He would claim he did not understand implications. He would claim the collision was unfortunate accident caused by his incompetence, not deliberate sabotage. And he would hold to this story no matter what happened. The interrogators tried everything. Offered deals, offered to spare his family, offered reduced sentences, showed photographs of executed saboteurs, played recordings of men screaming under interrogation, threatened to arrest his sister in Lyon. Pierre did not break. He repeated his story, over and over, unchanged, consistent, the story of a railway worker who made a mistake with catastrophic consequences, but a mistake nonetheless. On the third day, a new interrogator entered, Sturmbahnführer Kurt Hoffmann. Older than Mengel, perhaps 50, with scarred features suggesting a lifetime of violence. He did not carry a file. He carried a leather belt and an expression suggesting he was about to enjoy himself. "I have been authorized to use alternative interrogation methods," Hoffmann said conversationally. "Methods that are not gentle. Methods designed to break resistance and extract truth. I am giving you one opportunity to cooperate voluntarily. After that, the methods become more severe. Do you understand?" Pierre understood. He had heard stories about men who went into rooms with Hoffmann and came out unrecognizable. Stories about men who would confess to anything to make pain stop. "I want to know," Hoffmann continued, "whether you acted alone or with assistance, who trained you, who provided tools, what your contact with French resistance consists of, names of everyone involved, and why you did it." "I acted alone," Pierre said. It was truth. But truth would not save him, would not save Margot. Hoffmann smiled. "Let us test that statement." He produced a rubber hose and water bucket. What happened over the next 3 hours defied description. Pain without shape, pain without logic. Pain that obliterated thought and replaced it with nothing except desire for it to stop. When it finally stopped, Pierre was on the floor, unable to move, unable to speak, barely able to breathe. "Will you cooperate?" Hoffmann asked. Pierre could not answer. His mouth was filled with blood, his ribs broken, his left eye swollen shut. "I will take your silence as refusal," Hoffmann said. "We will continue tomorrow." He left Pierre on the floor for another hour before guards came to take him back to his cell. The interrogation continued for 72 hours. Different methods, different officers, different threats. The threats about Margot became more specific. They had her photograph, her work schedule, information about her routines. They could arrest her at any time. On the morning of the third day, Mengel returned to the interrogation room. Alone, carrying a folder. "Your sister, Margot Lacroix, is scheduled to be arrested this morning," Mengel said. "She does not yet know you have been arrested. But within the hour, military police will arrive at Saint-Louis Hospital and take her into custody. She will be brought to a facility in Lyon. She will be interrogated, she will be convicted, and she will be executed. He paused. Unless, Mengele continued, you decide to cooperate. Unless you provide complete and detailed confession. Unless you explain exactly what you did and why. If you cooperate, I will personally ensure your sister remains at liberty. I will ensure she is never arrested. I will ensure she survives the war. But only if you cooperate completely. Only if you hold nothing back. Do you understand? Pierre understood. Mengele was offering a choice between his own life and his sister's life. He understood that confession would bring faster execution. But the pain would be more intense. The interrogators would want everything. They would want names of resistance contacts, details of other sabotage acts. They would want to understand the entire network. And when they finished extracting information from his broken body and shattered mind, they would execute him in a manner designed to maximize suffering. But his sister would live. At the end of 6 hours, Mengele returned. I will confess. Pierre said, everything, but only if you give me your word my sister will not be harmed. Mengele smiled, not kindly. You have my word. Write down everything, every detail, every thought, every moment. For the next 48 hours, Pierre wrote, his hand cramping, his mind fragmenting. But his story remained consistent. He had acted alone. He had acted without support from French resistance or any organization. He had acted because he hated the occupation. He had acted because he saw an opportunity to inflict maximum damage with minimal risk. He described mechanical details of the clock adjustment, mathematical calculations that led him to determine manipulation necessary to cause collision. The moment he realized approximately 1,900 men would die, how he sat in the signal box and watched them burn. When the confession was finished, Mengele read through carefully, asking clarifying questions, probing for inconsistencies. But the confession was airtight. It was the confession of a man who had performed deliberate sabotage, a man who had calculated consequences, a man who understood exactly what he was doing when he adjusted that clock. Your sister will be spared, Mengele said when interrogation was complete. I will see to it personally. Whether or not the Reich survives, your sister will not be punished for your crimes. Pierre believed him, or chose to believe him. The distinction had become irrelevant. The court-martial took 1 day. Evidence was overwhelming. Confession complete. Judgment inevitable. Guilty. Sentence: death by firing squad. Execution within 72 hours. 3 days later, on June 10, 1944, Pierre Lacroix was executed in a courtyard at Amiens North Station. Not a firing squad, the Wehrmacht had run out of bullets, a rope, a wooden gallows, an audience of Wehrmacht soldiers ordered to watch, to understand consequences of resistance. Jean-Baptiste Rouchet was first. A schoolteacher arrested for distributing forbidden newspapers. He walked to the gallows with his head high, refused the blindfold, looked out at assembled soldiers as the noose was placed. His last words were Latin, a prayer, perhaps for France, perhaps for forgiveness. The soldiers did not understand Latin. They knew only that he died without screaming. Michel Duval was second. Younger, the fear showed. His legs gave out climbing steps, and guards had to support him. But when the noose was placed, something shifted. He looked out and smiled. Not happiness, defiance. A smile of a man who knew he had done something that mattered. The smile remained even as the rope tightened. Pierre was third. He walked slowly, his body broken from interrogation but his mind clear. He climbed the steps, accepted the blindfold. And as the rope was placed, he thought about his sister. Margot, who would live because he had agreed to confess, who would continue working at the hospital, who might fall in love, have children, live a long and full life that would not have been possible if he had refused to speak. The noose tightened, the platform dropped away, and in the moment between life and death, Pierre Lacroix understood something. He understood that resistance was not about changing the war's outcome. The war would end regardless. The Nazis would fall, the occupation would end, the French would be liberated, history would proceed. The act of resistance was about asserting human agency in a world designed to deny it. It was about saying no to oppression's machinery. It was about creating moments of defiance that would live on in memories of those who witnessed them. It was about dying with knowledge that you had chosen your own death, rather than allowing the machinery to choose it for you. And then there was nothing but darkness. 3 weeks after execution, Lieutenant Mengele kept his word. Margot Lacroix was never arrested, never interrogated. She continued working at Saint-Louis Hospital in Lyon, unaware her brother had died to purchase her freedom. She did not learn of his death until 2 months later, when a letter arrived from a Wehrmacht clerk who had been part of the execution detail. The letter contained no details, no explanation. It simply informed her that Pierre Lacroix had been executed on June 10, 1944, for acts of sabotage. She wept. She grieved. And then she did what Pierre had done. She acted. She began using her position to help resistance fighters. She began moving weapons through hospital corridors. She began assisting in hiding escaped Allied prisoners. She did these things not to honor her brother's memory, but because her brother's death had shown her that action was possible, that resistance was possible, that the machinery of occupation could be resisted even at the cost of one's life. By the time France was liberated in August 1944, Margot Lacroix had become one of the most effective resistance operatives in Lyon. Her intelligence on German movements helped Allied forces plan their advance. Her assistance in smuggling downed pilots out of occupied France saved 47 American lives. The impact of Pierre's action was measurable in military statistics. The 21st Panzer Division's counterattack, deprived of replacement soldiers and supply trucks scheduled to arrive on Gamma 7 and Gamma 8, was delayed by 8 hours. That delay allowed American and British forces to consolidate positions in Normandy. That consolidation meant the breakout from beaches, scheduled to begin June 7th, began 1 day early. Private James Robert Callahan of the 101st Airborne was scheduled to be killed June 7th, 1944. The German counterattack that would have overrun his position was delayed. In those 8 hours, American artillery support arrived. Callahan lived. He returned to the United States, married a woman named Ruth, had 3 children. One became a doctor and helped save 5,000 lives over 50 years. Lieutenant Colonel Edward Whitney was scheduled to be killed June 8th, when a German tank crew would have caught him without cover. The tank crew never arrived. Their supply trucks had been destroyed at Amiens. They had no ammunition, no fuel, no orders. Whitney lived, continued his military career, published 3 books on military tactics that became required reading at West Point for 30 years. Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien was scheduled to be killed June 9th, hit by German artillery while moving through a hedgerow. The German artillery unit was not in position because supplies that should have arrived on Gamma 8 had not arrived. O'Brien lived, opened a hardware store in Boston after the war. His great-grandson currently serves as a United States Senator. In the 7 days following the Amiens collision, American casualties were reduced by an estimated 4,700 men. British casualties reduced by 3,200. The reduction was not because fighting was less intense. It was because German forces were under strength, under-equipped, because reinforcements and supplies that would have been used to crush the beachhead had instead been consumed in a collision at a railway junction in occupied France. By June 20th, the American breakout was irreversible. By June 25th, Americans captured Cherbourg. By July 1st, British captured Caen. By August 15th, Germans were in full retreat. By September 1st, Wehrmacht was fighting defensive war on Germany's border. None of this could be traced directly to Pierre Lacroix and his pocket watch. None appeared in official history as a result of Amiens collision. The railway incident was classified as tragic accident, mechanical failure, the kind of disaster that happens in war. But in archives of military intelligence, in files maintained by historians with access to complete information, the Amiens Junction collision was recognized for what it was: a turning point. A moment when the mathematics of war had been altered by a railway signalman with a Swiss pocket watch worth 8 francs. 1,900 men died to make that moment possible. 1,897 German soldiers, whose names were recorded in rosters later destroyed or lost. And one French railway worker, whose name was erased from every official record. The signal box at Amiens remained in operation for 30 years after the war. No one ever adjusted the master clock again. No one sat in that box and manipulated time. The clock ran at normal rate, precise and measured and honest. It measured hours and days and years of peace that followed occupation. The space where the clock hung remained empty for exactly 1 year. In 1946, a new clock was installed, a German clock seized from a Wehrmacht garrison in Berlin. It ran perfectly, kept perfect time, and every day railway workers would glance at it and remember the old clock that changed history. Some knew the truth about Pierre Lacroix and his pocket watch. Some understood that a single man, acting alone, with nothing but knowledge and determination and willingness to accept death, had altered the war's outcome. Most did not know. Most accepted the official story. Clock malfunction, temperature variation, mechanical failure. But in railroad workers' bars in Amiens, in conversations late at night over glasses of wine, the real story persisted. The story of a railway signalman who resisted. The story of a man who sacrificed his life not to save France. France would be saved regardless, but to assert that resistance was possible. That defiance was possible. That a single human being, armed with nothing but determination and a Swiss pocket watch, could matter. The story did not make him a hero. Heroes were celebrated. Heroes had monuments. Heroes had names inscribed in books. Pierre Lacroix had no monuments, no books. Only the story passed from person to person, generation to generation. A story that said, it is possible. It is possible to act. It is possible to resist. It is possible to change the course of history. And that, perhaps, was the greatest memorial anyone could ask for.